Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Duc Ong with Tri-City Equity Group. With me is my co-host, Steve Firos. Today we have Daniel Mills on the show. Daniel is a university professor in Japan where he's lived for 14 years. He began investing in real estate in 2014. His portfolio, which is located in Idaho, Alabama, and Tennessee, includes 11 single-family homes, 10 duplexes, and a 12-plex. Daniel utilized a number of strategies, including conventional and commercial loans, owner financing, BRRRR, partnerships, and private money to acquire these properties. After achieving financial freedom in 2020, Daniel has shifted to passive investment strategies to grow and diversify his real estate portfolio. He's currently invested as a limited partner in 2 multifamily syndications and is seeking additional private placements in self-storage, industrial, mobile home parks, and senior living. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, so how did you get started in your journey to earn passive income?
I came to Japan, as I said, about 14 years ago. And I was definitely a late starter. I didn't even finish my bachelor's degree till I was 28. I had no money when I came out here. I was actually $20,000 in student loan debt. And I knew that I had to make some sort of change. I had to start a career. I had to do something. So I actually bought a book called The Idiot's Guide to Getting Rich. And as stupid as it sounds, it's a great book. It just kind of was a fire book before there was fire. They kind of led you through the path of index fund investing, real estate, starting a business, all the steps along the way. And I followed it pretty religiously for a couple of years until I got kind of to the next level. And then in 2000, so it was 2014 is when I made my first real estate investment. And, that's really when things kind of started working for me. So when I came here initially, I was actually only earning $30,000 a year as a children's English teacher, which is a very common job here in Japan. And I eventually earned a master's degree and a doctorate degree and moved up in my job, higher salaries. But I did a lot of side hustling to make money. And then I started just pouring that all first into index funds and then into real estate. And that's been the path all along until, as I said, about last year, we hit the mark where we're at lean fire. We cover all of our costs with our real estate and not really with our index funds. We're not drawing on that right now. But we're about 3 to 5 years away from completely replacing our incomes, if that's what we decide to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what is your why for building passive income?
I think like a lot of people, it's sort of freedom, but it's really for us choices. My wife is also a university professor, and it is the greatest job in the world. And I didn't know that getting into it. We just kind of started off teaching, and we're like, oh, this is fun, and you kind of move along. But as a tenured university professor, I really only work about 7 months of the year. I have spring and summer off. I have minimal administration duties at my university. I do quite a bit of research, so that takes up time. But even during the semester, I really only need to be at the campus like 3 days a week. So I almost have this sort of financial freedom have a time freedom for the most part anyway. But we wanted more choices. We wanted to be in a situation that, like, my mother lives in the United States alone. If something happened to her and we needed to leave, we wanted to be able to do that. We didn't want to have to think like, oh, I'm going to lose my job and I can't afford to live. So that's really been the main thing for us. It's just my wife and I, we don't have kids. So we're really just want to have choices in the future and do what we want to do throughout the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I love that. So I know that you have a couple of partnerships. So how did you find your partners and how did you decide on roles and responsibilities within your partnership?
Okay. Yeah, so I actually found them on BiggerPockets, and the first person that reached out to me, it was people that had a connection to Japan or were actually living in Japan. So my two main partners that I'm teamed up with, one is a commercial lender. Actually, he's based in Honolulu, but he used to live in Japan. His wife's Japanese. And then my other partner was a real estate attorney in Tokyo, and he's also American. Went to UCLA. I'm from California, so we had a lot of connections, and we just started talking. And this is kind of maybe one of my most interesting real estate stories, because we just met each other, we got to know each other, we clicked, and we thought, let's invest together. And the thing that I was really bringing to the deal, these guys, a commercial lender and a real estate attorney, they know way more about real estate than I do. But I was kind of the people person. So, they actually called me, in Japanese, they say kanban musume, which means like the poster girl. So I was out there meeting people and doing things, and I was pretty good at identifying markets. So I identified like Boise, Idaho before it exploded. And the next market I had identified about 3 years prior was Huntsville, Alabama, which I know a lot of people are into now. So I had made a lot of these connections in Huntsville with realtors, with property managers. I even went and bought a single family house there just to lay the groundwork, because I knew I wanted to do bigger deals. When my partners came on, I brought them. That's what I brought to the partnership, was that I had the connections, and we went in there, and our plan was just to buy a fourplex, maybe even a duplex together, and then slowly build. And kind of out of the blue, our realtor came to us and he's like, I have this 19 duplex portfolio. They're over 100 years old. It's 1.5 million, and I can get owner financing. Do you guys want to do it? And, at first we were like, well, that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for such a big deal. But as we started to run the numbers, we were like, okay, we could put this together. It was a crazy deal, and it still is. I still own most of them today. Because what happened was, the guy that owned it, it was a family business that they'd owned for over 50 years. And the property manager actually lived on site. He'd been managing the properties since he was 14. He'd been doing them for 50 years. And he looked like Yosemite Sam, had a 6-gun in his hip. We had these two other guys that were, that were full-time employees. We had trucks. So it was like a whole business that we were buying into. But the owner lived on an island somewhere. And he said, I don't need to sell it. If you guys want it, this is what I'll do. Owner financing, no inspections. And, it's really not the best thing to do. But as we looked into it, our realtor, who's quite experienced as an investor himself, he said, I believe in this enough that I'll partner with you. And I think that's actually a really good thing to think about when you're investing long distance, is, partnering with local people. And he was willing to come in and even put some of his own money into it. So, that was the first deal that we did. And we bought into this. Luckily, because we have a real estate attorney on the team, he was able to draw up all the documents, figure out what our roles are. But where it kind of got divided with our, me and then the 3 other partners, was our realtor was our guy on the ground. He had a lot of connections with construction and the fix-ups and everything. The real estate attorney, of course, is doing most of the paperwork, getting all that together. And our my partner, who's a lender, he got us all the financing. Eventually, we started to get like credit cards and lines of credit, and we started to use that to move into other deals. So he was doing the financing and just all the finances, just making the spreadsheets and everything. So long story short with this project, I mean, we're 3 years in. We thought it was going to be a monster cash flow deal from probably 6 months to a year in. We have so far not taken any money out. It's just going back in. We've been fixing them up. And what we've realized is that the money to be made on this is kind of flipping the properties, like a long-term flip. So they've doubled in value because, we picked a good market. Huntsville is just incredible. There's no inventory. And so we've been fixing them up and then selling them to other investors. And we're probably going to exit next year and make quite a lot of money on it. But I will say that's maybe one of my failures, because we didn't we didn't really do the due diligence we should have, but that was because we couldn't. And we took a chance. And the great thing is it was really like a platform to jump into other things, because from there we were able to move into a 12-plex, which is almost brand new, which is a great property. We've been able to raise the rents incredibly. And my partners have decided to syndicate, and I decided not to do that. And they have syndicated 2 deals so far in Huntsville, and I believe they're working on one of their biggest ones right now. So, it was a good way to go, even though we didn't follow all the rules.
It sounds like it's going to be a home run once you're done with them all.
Yeah, I hope so.
So how did you decide on that exit strategy of like slowly selling off the duplexes as opposed to just holding it long term?
It was really about the numbers. I mean, they cash flowed, but the money, again, there were so many things to fix. I mean, when we actually got to inspect the properties, I remember one of them, we went in there and there was a person living there, and they'd lived there for 5 years, 10 years, with a hole in the floor to the dirt under the house. And, we said to them like, oh, we got to fix this. And they're like, nah, it's okay. We'll put a rug over it. So that was also kind of the level of tenant we had in there. And very slowly, we fixed things as they went, as people moved out, and we've moved in a much higher level of tenant. The rents have gone up, and then we started getting offers. People started coming to us and like, we'll buy one from you. We'll buy the whole portfolio. And we started to realize with the comps that, that was definitely the best strategy for us. The thing with owning 100-year-old properties is there's just so much that can go wrong. Even if you're fixing everything up, the plumbing, the wiring, the foundations, all of these type of things, there's things you can't see that will come up later. And so I think I'm ready to sort of be done with it. My partners, I think, see a little bit more runway on it, but I'm not really the guy in the ground, so I'm okay. But really, it's just numbers. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. So switching gears a bit, one of the best benefits of multifamily is the tax benefits. So I heard you were able to use depreciation to write off your income. So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So, I'm a permanent resident in Japan. That's my visa status. And I'm a U.S. citizen. So the U.S. is quite unique. I think there's only one other country in the world that requires you to file taxes even if you live abroad. So you never can escape the U.S. tax system. But you have to file, but that doesn't mean you have to pay anything, because many countries like Japan have a reciprocal tax agreement. So if I'm paying taxes here, I usually don't have to pay in the U.S. There's a few exceptions. Japan is also one of these countries, though, that they tax worldwide income and wealth. And there's a lot of issues with that. So, I mean, for example, if my mother were to pass away and leave me her U.S. estate, I have to pay taxes on that in Japan, and there's a much lower threshold. And even though my mother doesn't live in Japan, she doesn't. She only comes to visit. I still got to pay tax on it because I'm a permanent resident. So, with all of that bad sort of tax issues, the good tax issue was actually Japan had a loophole, and they just closed it this year, where if you bought houses in the U.S. that were over 20 years old, and especially wood structure houses, you could depreciate the entire amount of the structure in 4 years, and you could do it right off of your income. So, someone like myself, I earn about $100,000 a year. If I were to buy, $400,000 structure houses in it doesn't have to be in 1 year, I could depreciate my entire salary. So I earn zero salary in Japan. And so this was sort of a hidden benefit we didn't know about. We just started buying real estate for our future, and we realized very quickly, like, wow, this is incredible. So since 2014, 15, especially once I got the numbers of properties up, we've really not had to pay much tax at all. There's some extra, taxes we do have to pay, but we've been really lucky with that. However, this year they closed that loophole. So we don't know the exact law, but the last year was this year. Next year, we will not be able to claim that amount. My wife, who is a financial planner here in Japan, she believes we'll still be able to take deductions, but it's going to be nowhere near what we've been doing for the last few years. One little caveat to that is that it only counts for properties you own in your personal name. So they do not, if I own something in an LLC, or if I do something like a syndication as a passive investor, that is considered like a business. So I actually don't need to report very much to the Japanese government about that. They just want to know the equity, but I can't take any of the, deductions or anything off my Japanese taxes. So that's one of the reasons that we kept buying for a number of years, single family houses over 20 years old. And I'm very interested to see how this is going to affect the Hawaii market actually in the coming year, if they don't have that big deduction. So
yeah, well, that's interesting. That's super cool though, because like that gives us additional insight. Obviously, you face unique challenges, that most of us won't face, but just having to be in a different country, and of course, I knew you're exactly right that the U.S. We're one of the few where it's like, no, Uncle Sam, they want their cut. They don't care where you're at, if you're whether you're living in the country or not. But what stands out is, of course, it's like, hey man, you're a solution finder. It's like, okay, let's. I think too many people are also afraid of kind of how taxes work. It's like, well, look, there's a lot written into the tax code that's actually to your benefit. So it's always to your benefit to own property. You just have to learn kind of what those rules are, right? And kind of learn how to navigate, right? So that's awesome. Yeah. So, obviously you guys still have, quite a few properties under ownership, under management here for you guys and you and your partners. How has, we're recording this, obviously we're in 2021 now, springtime, we'll say. How have you guys navigated COVID with all of, the rest of your portfolio in terms of management, deal flow, that kind of deal?
Well, it's actually been surprisingly good. We were very worried in the beginning. I am not only the poster girl, the kanban musume of our group, but I am the head worrier. Like I worry about everything. And my partners are so lax about stuff. They're like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. So when COVID hit, I was really proactive, like reaching out to all of our property managers, looking for solutions, thinking this was going to be something we're really going to have to navigate. A couple of things that I did do is in my personal portfolio and also for our business portfolio, those duplexes that we own, we did get a disaster relief loan from the Small Business Administration. And that's been an interesting process because I actually contacted them beforehand and said, I'm not sure if we're going to face any difficulties. Is it okay? Should we apply? And they said, oh, just apply. It's fine. But I found out a lot of the people that are manning the phones don't really know what's going on. They're not really the experts of the loans. But we were able to get those loans and, to have a big cash cushion. However, because we didn't need as much as we thought, we were able to pay them back. So that's kind of what we've done. So we did use them, and I think it did carry us over the gap. It's a pretty low rate. I don't have it here, but it's a pretty low rate loan, about 3%. And so we did do that. As I said, we also reached out to all the property managers. Brandon Turner of BiggerPockets had put out kind of a how-to guide to talk to your property managers and your tenants. And so we were really proactive with that. All that being said, we haven't faced too much issue, except for I had one tenant in a single family house in Huntsville who very early on said he had COVID, and his COVID lasted like 8 months. And we found out my PM was actually quite proactive. She was like a little detective, and she was going around and she's like, he doesn't have COVID. I talked to the hospital. And, so we had this, we had a situation where a guy lived for free for 8 months. We couldn't evict him. That happens. We had a few payment issues with our portfolio here and there, but pretty much everybody caught up once the stimulus checks came in. But really no problem. For me, as I said, I kind of veered off from my partners. So we started off with the idea that we were going to syndicate together. And for me in Japan at the time, both of them were living in the States. One of them has moved back, but I didn't want to be taking phone calls at 3 a.m. And to be honest, I have to say, one of the things that drove me to not become a syndicator is watching you guys do it. So like I've been so happy with my syndication deal that I did with you guys. And I was like, wow, these guys are working so hard. They're doing all this stuff. I don't want to do that. So, my partners went off and they started,
you heard it here first, guys.
Yeah.
To all of our listeners.
So, you've cost me a lot of money because they've done, 2 deals. They seem to have no trouble finding deals because we made the connections in the market. And so the deals come to us. There's no us really finding deals. It's people like our realtor who's active in the market coming back and finding us deals. The only active deal that I did last year was the same thing. The same realtor, he knew I didn't want to do the big deals right now. He said, hey, I found some land. Do you want me to build a duplex for you? It's like, okay, yeah. So it was a 1% rule duplex in Huntsville, which is really hard to find, brand new. So really, I can't say that I've had too much issues with COVID. If my Huntsville house where the guy didn't pay for 8 months was my only house, I would have been devastated. But I mean, that's the beauty of scale, multifamily, having a lot of properties, because, my other ones covered it. So it wasn't such a big deal.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that is a great job of a couple of things there for sure. These partnerships have been like, absolutely vital. I mean, I think that's a key takeaway. Just because those have transformed into additional connections for you guys, right? And because they know you're serious, because they know you guys are active, you're taking action, they're willing to help. Hey, you want another deal? You want to? Yeah, sure, of course. Like I'm not looking, but okay, sure, yeah, I'll take advantage. And it's one of those things like I think sometimes people who have a hard time getting started, right? They don't understand. It's like, no, it's like body motion tends to stay in motion, right? Like good things will come to people who are actually taking action, getting out there, doing things. So, for those of you, our listeners who are, on the fence about whether this real estate thing is, something you should get into, it's like, get into it, just do something, start somewhere.
Yeah.
So
I think that's awesome. The big lesson of my duplexes, right? I mean, we took a lot of chances. I wouldn't recommend people doing things like we did. But one thing I always tell people is if you're going to take a chance, take it in a good market. So I'm really big into the markets. There's a lot of people chasing cash flow right now. And, cash flow is great. I have a bunch of properties. I have like 7-8 houses, I think, in Memphis. And they cash flow like crazy and they're great properties. But Memphis is kind of a flat city, at least for now. It's going up a little bit, but it's not a big population increase or anything like that. But if you're going to so I would never take a big chance in Memphis. I wouldn't buy properties unseen in Memphis. But Huntsville, had those market fundamentals. And so it allowed us to say, okay, we're going to take a bit of a chance here. And worst case scenario, the market's going to carry us probably, right? It's not 100%, but it's if you are going to take those chances, that's where you should probably do it. But I want to reiterate, I'm not saying to take chances normally. I usually buy in the numbers, but if you are, that's kind of the place to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm like, looking back, knowing what you know now, would you have bought the property, not being able to do, inspections, knowing that you guys would have to, be faced with a bunch of challenges?
I don't know. Part of it is that it's a great story. I mean, we've had so many funny things. It's not really funny. I mean, it's been so terrible that it's funny. Like we had one of the duplexes burned down, and it seems like it was arson. Like, somebody threw a firebomb into the property because they had a feud with the neighbor. I mean, it's been crazy, some of the things that have I've gone on. So just for the story alone, it's been worth it. But I think when I look back on it, I think my partners have benefited much more from it because they went on to syndication. Because they did syndication, they built their reputation with those properties. And for me, because I kind of took a step back, maybe it wasn't as worth it for me. But at the same time, I had a good time doing it, and I learned a lot of stuff from it, and I think it's going to work out in the end. But
yeah, that's awesome.
Maybe not. So if you have high aspirations and you're trying to build something, maybe it's something like that's worth it, but not for me.
You still got a smile on your face, so that's hey, that's that at the end of the deal or towards the end of a deal, you still got that. Hey, that works, right? Well, that's the little bit. Obviously, that's one of you guys' early deals, right? Early on. Tell us about maybe something a little bit more recently that you've invested in. How'd you find it? How'd you structure it?
Yeah. So as I said, the last year or so, mostly I've been doing passive investments. Okay. So, I invested with you guys. So with Tri-City in your first El Paso one, I think you got the second one closed recently. And I also invested with Anthony Pinto. Did you guys interview him as well? Maybe. He's a sailor up here in Tokyo. And he's got a syndication together. We did one in Savannah, Georgia. So I was in on that. But the last active deal, if we can talk more about the passive ones later, but the last active deal was that duplex build. So there's a couple of interesting lessons there, I think. So first of all, Huntsville, for any of your listeners that know it, it's a hot market. We really got in at a good time when we did 3 years ago. So it's really hard to find deals. And one of the things I've been really successful with Huntsville is to look in the periphery. So what are the surrounding cities that have the characteristics, that we want? Things like good schools, or they're building there's one section where they're building a new interstate that's going to connect, or a new highway that's going to connect one part of another city to the Redstone Arsenal, which is kind of a big military complex in the center of town where many people work. So I really looked for that. There's a couple of cities that I like Athens, Harvest, Hazel Green. There's a couple places that I've been looking at. So when my partner / realtor found some land in Tony, which is just outside of Harvest, we knew this was good. This is something that was within close proximity to the city, and a lot of people that were living in Huntsville. I found a lot of the locals, as the city have grown, they feel like they lost the sort of small town feel. So they've moved out to some of these outside, 10, 15, 20 minutes outside the city. So, my partner, he was building a duplex. He does this as part of his investment strategy. He builds mostly like kind of spec homes and things like that. So, we went through it together. He knew the building process. But when he came to me with it, I actually had a lot of money committed to my passive investments. And I really didn't have the money at that time in cash to close on the deal. So again, I looked for a partner. So there's a professor that I know here in Japan. He owns real estate, and I don't think he's been on one of your passive deals, but I brought him in for some other passive deals as well. And we talked, and he decided I also didn't have a loan. I didn't have a loan slot because I've used all of my conventional loans. So he came in, used his loan slot, bought it, with his cash. And then on the back end, I was able to reimburse him. And then we quit claimed me to that deed. And we cleared that with the lender beforehand. So, I mean, we weren't just doing this backdoor. We went to the lender. We said, this is what we're going to do. Is that going to be okay? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. So that's what we ended up doing. So used a couple of strategies there, my connections, a new partnership with somebody, and then using his loan slot and a quit claim deed to get me on there. And it's, we were able to rent it out right away, as I said, at the 1% rule, which is almost unheard of for a brand new property in Huntsville.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Again, same thing, right? Like key is those partnerships. And again, I'm sure your friend was just like seeing you take action. It's like, well, yeah, this Daniel's doing it. Like I trust him. So what's obviously we're talking about a lot of wins and success that you've had, and obviously well deserved. What's been an obstacle that you faced in your journey as an investor, right? How did you overcome that obstacle?
Well, I think that the biggest obstacle I have is that I'm not just long distance investing, I'm extreme long distance investing. Kind of a plus for me, like we talked about the partnerships and everything, is that I am okay relinquishing control, and I'm okay with making that decision. I've met a lot of people that can't do that. And if you can't do it, it makes it so much harder to do it at a distance. I'm okay with researching people, making sure it's all people for me, and if I trust people, I'm going to trust them, and I'm just going to go forward with it. So that's been, I think that's a big obstacle for a lot of people. It hasn't been for me, but going back to where the obstacle is, because I'm at a distance, there's so many issues. Like, for example, I just tried to refinance 4 of my properties. Really, I want to take advantage of these great rates. I had 4 single family houses. I knew I could refinance, I could pull money out, reinvest it. And I wasn't able to do it. And the reason was because of COVID, they closed down the consulate. And here in Japan, the only place I can get a notary is at a consulate. And first of all, it costs $50 a seal to get a notary. So a typical house is 7 seals. So $350 per house, and if I was in Hawaii, I've actually flown into Hawaii just to get notaries because it's worth it just to have a little vacation and pay $100 or less, for a bunch of closes. So because I wasn't able to go to the consulate, they gave me a bunch of other things. They said, well, we could do an online notary for the ones in Alabama, not the ones in Idaho. And then you could get a power of attorney and all these things. But in the end, they just weren't able to close it. By the time they were able to get to the end, the rate lock had run out and it just wasn't financially worth it at that point. So I had to take a step back. So there's a lot of things like that. I've missed deals because they came to me in the middle of the night while I'm sleeping, and I've woken up and it's already been taken. I've had things like that. So these are all things you have to deal with. But I think there's also a big benefit from being so far away, in that I have never had the urge to go and mow my own lawns or, property manage myself. Like I saw some guy in BiggerPockets the other day that was just like, I want to write it into the contract that I'm the one that's going to mow all my lawns for, and he owns 5 or 6 properties. And I'm like, is that scalable? And it would never occur to me because I can't fly to America to mow lawns. So I have to create systems, and I have to, again, relinquish control to people that I trust to do those things for me, and have a plan in place if something does go wrong, that I can take care of it. And that's mainly the thing. But yeah, it is hard at a distance, especially if you can't relinquish that control. But for me, it's been not so bad.
Oh, that's awesome. Lessons learned though, for those of you guys that may be, those investors out there, want to be investors, and thinking, okay, well, like Honolulu, right? Expensive market to be here. I find that out quite a bit, right? Like people don't want to go outside of something that they can't see and touch, but then you don't realize like that. You don't have the urge, and you can't scratch that itch to go mow the lawn, right? Or go touch it or go be involved in a project. That's actually a good thing at times. It really can be. So
I've actually only seen and touched in person. Let me see, 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 of my single family houses. And then I did go, after we bought it, I went to the duplexes and I walked around and kind of went into a few units. But that's it, because, I'm not a property inspector. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not a handyman. I'm not any of these things. So what am I going to do in those properties, right? Like, I have to find people that I trust that actually can do that stuff,
No, that's cool. That's cool. Well, my last question to you, what's the biggest mistake that you think that you've made in your investing career, and what have you learned from that? Like, what's your biggest takeaway?
So I definitely have been pretty lucky, so that I haven't suffered. Like my biggest mistake again would probably be the duplexes, but even that hasn't been a big mistake. Of course, not starting early enough. I didn't get started until I was in my mid 30s, I think, when it happened. But I think, to give you a more concise answer, is that just not doing enough due diligence on things. You definitely need to do that due diligence, and not just on the property. Like I kind of said this before, but I think the market is so essential. And it's something I'm seeing a lot of people miss, because number one, they want to invest right next door to them, regardless of the fact that there's no population growth and jobs are leaving the area. It doesn't matter. I'm going to invest. I want to be near it. And then the second thing is that people are chasing cash flow so much that they're just looking for cash flow. And if you just look at properties, you could be like, wow, this is a home run. But the thing is, and it's not just even the general market. Like when we look in Huntsville, where those duplexes are located is very different from right down the street where there's a Starbucks. And so understanding that's been eye-opening for me. And I think where I learned a lot about that was with, I think you guys know Neil Bawa. And he has a very good free course on Udemy called Real Focus. It takes 1 hour and it kind of runs you through market analysis. But I think that's my biggest mistakes, if I look back, is that I didn't do enough market analysis and due diligence in some properties, and I got lucky with them. So none of it has turned out bad, because the markets can save you. But I wish if I could go back, I would have been more strategic about that.
It's great though that actually hammers home, location, right? Because like that, even if you don't have a deal that's a home run, just knowing where to buy alone, right? Because some part of that, of course, is speculation, right? Like, it's okay, like, you really can't like pencil that, but you're tracking the path of progress, right? Like you're looking at these, job growth, you're looking at, where the development is happening, and that is something that well, look, I know, like even if it's not cash flowing now, like if we just sit this thing out, there's enough activity in the market, there's enough demand, that can save your bacon, right? So that's great. But
I couldn't agree more about the market analysis, because if you pick the right market, even if other things go wrong, sometimes the market could just bail you out too. So and
that's the thing, it's a hedge. It's not a guarantee, it's definitely not a guarantee, but it's a hedge. I mean, one thing and again, this is definitely part of being lucky, but I was running through, because I'm kind of in this glide path to possible early retirement. I started looking more at my properties and kind of like, what do I want to change? Like, how am I going to shuffle this around? And one thing that just surprised my wife and I so much was that our single family portfolio, the entire amount of money we invested, including closing costs, everything, was $180,000. The equity in those properties right now is $750,000. And we started in 2014. And that's a big testament to the market, because the markets we chose, like Boise was kind of a fluke, and that's been the biggest one. But then we were very intentional, first of all, about Memphis, because we needed a cash flow base, but then moving into Huntsville and making sure, and I'm not even counting my duplexes with my partners, I'm not counting all that stuff. This is just my personal portfolio of single families and one duplex that I own with a partner. And that's, it's incredible. It's amazing how much wealth can be built with real estate, because there's so many ways to build wealth, not just cash flow, but market appreciation, forced appreciation, the tax benefits. I don't think I would have done that well with just the stock market, though. I don't know. The S&P 500 has been performing incredible. So
yeah, definitely. It's amazing. So we're going to shift gears to the fire round now. What's the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
The best book I recommend, I think, let me see. I really like the $1 Million Real Estate Investor. Is that what it's called? The Gary Keller one? Yeah, that was the first real estate book I read after my Idiot's Guide to Getting Rich. So I think that was a great one for me, and it really got me started.
What's your superpower?
My superpower is my kanban musume powers of persuasion. No, I just my poster girl persona. So yeah, I love talking to people, and so I think that's I have a lot of people reach out to me, even people that are just starting out, and sometimes they look at what I've done and they're like, oh, I'm probably bothering you with all these questions, but I just love talking to people, and that's really helped out a lot. Because that's really what this is. This business is all about people. It really is. Like when you boil it down, it's really about people, and so I think that's really been my superpower with real estate investing.
I completely agree. So what is the biggest lesson you've learned over your career?
Okay. So, I think market is the key, the analysis of the market and, just kind of hedging your bets on the best market is really big for me. But the other thing is learning how to trust people to do their job. This applies even to my own life. I'm a university professor. I coordinate classes and, I have people sort of working under me. And, if you're hiring people that are qualified to do the job, for the most part, you can let them do their job, right? You don't have to micromanage stuff. And that's always been the key, I think, with real estate is I find the best people I can to do the job and I let them do the job. I'm not trying to do the job for them, though maybe my partners would say I sometimes am, but only with them.
All right. So for the busy working professional working towards financial freedom, what advice do you have?
I would definitely consider passive investing in syndications. I find that a lot of people don't do it, first of all, because they maybe don't like relinquishing control. So that's part of it. But the other thing is there's a misconception that you need to be an accredited investor to get started. And I'm currently accredited. I wasn't actually when I first started. I was just under the threshold. But there's a lot of syndications that don't require you to be accredited. Your syndication that I went into was you just need to be sophisticated. And in addition to that, there's some loopholes that have come in. Like currently, I believe you can take the Series 65 exam to become accredited. So it isn't really an obstacle. So if you're really busy and this is not something you want to actively do and manage properties yourself, I would look into passive investing in syndications. And there's so much more than just multifamily as well. As I said, my next deal I'm doing is an industrial one. And it's you can really diversify much better than you probably could yourself.
Excellent advice. So how can our audience connect with you?
So maybe this is going to show my age, but I am on Facebook mostly. So I do have Instagram, but it's not really real estate related and I don't post very much. But I'm mainly on Facebook and I'm mainly in the BiggerPockets money group. As I've sort of said, I'm not so much of this syndicator real estate guy as I am more of like a financial freedom guy. So I think resonate better with the money group. So if you go onto Facebook and you belong to the BiggerPockets money group, I'm there all the time. I'm always posting stuff, and it's really easy to reach out to me.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the show. And we learned a ton and glad that you're able to share your experience investing from extreme long distance.
Thank you. Yeah, I told David Green that. I sent him a message saying that, his long distance real estate investing has got nothing on my extreme long distance real estate investing.
That sounds like a book title right there. That's one you need to write.
I know. I'm thinking
your early retirement.
Yeah.
All right, what an awesome interview! I have another recording with Daniel Mills, all the way from Japan. So we really appreciate Daniel having come on the show today. Obviously, if you guys are curious about what it's like to be in Japan, always wanted to visit, make sure you hit him up. Definitely connect with him if you guys are out across the Pacific out that way. It's a great, beautiful country. So he's sharing with us a bunch of gems. Obviously, he's a part of the FIRE movement. If you guys aren't familiar, the Financial Independence Retire Early. So that kind of kickstarted what they are doing, and him and his wife, in terms of retiring, putting financial vehicles into play with real estate. One of the things I took away is being super key is the partnerships that he's able to develop in order to get his momentum going. He had great partnerships early on with a real estate attorney, commercial lender, and that really opened up doors, it sounds like, to fast track the progress that he was able to make. So that was huge. Another one too, being so isolated out in Japan, a big one that I took away from him was like, be able to relinquish the control. Trust in the numbers. If it looks good, you gotta not try to micromanage the teams on the ground that you build, and be system focused. It's not always the best to be able to, to go touch everything that you need to, deal with a property. If you're doing it on due diligence, of course, but, if you're investing at a distance, it doesn't make sense for you to be there every time a toilet breaks, so putting people and systems into motion to be able to handle that can actually be a huge benefit. That actually helps to prevent you from creating another job, which is key. And also too, another big takeaway from his was learn your market. Don't be so dependent on just having to invest only in your backyard. Go and research additional markets that are growing. Get in that path of progress. So that you're not totally reliant on just investing in your own town just because, hey, I live here and I want to make sure I have to be here because I don't feel like researching anywhere else, or you feel obligated that you have to invest specifically there in your own town. If there's better markets out there, and I guarantee you that there are, go out there and do some research. Plenty of tools online. We share them all the time if you're as a part of our multifamily and more group. So yeah, those are some huge takeaways that I got from Daniel. So again, great at having him on the show. Make sure you guys go back and check out the episode.
All right. If you're interested in learning more about passive investing, go to tricityequity.com to download our free guide. To connect with like-minded investors, join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and More. If you found value in this podcast, please subscribe and give us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you know anyone who might resonate with today's podcast, please share the episode with them. See you next time.